Give me a ghost. Give me a shadow. Give me anything that can fly. The general yelled. His unit was gone. His jets were grounded. Then, an ancient engine tore through the sky. An unregistered A-10. Unauthorized. Unlisted. Unstoppable. The Cerberus Command Center at Vanguard Air Force Base was not a place for contemplation. It was a tomb of cold, hard data. Buried deep beneath the earth. It was a world insulated from the sun, the wind, and the messy realities of human hope. The only light came from the cool, blue glow of holographic displays that swam in the air like ethereal jellyfish, casting long, dancing shadows across the polished concrete floors. The air itself was sterile, recycled, carrying the faint, clean scent of ozone from the server racks and the cold, metallic tang of pure, unadulterated stress. This was the heart of the machine, and at its very center stood General Alistair Finch. Finch was a man forged in the image of the system he served, precise, orderly, and unflappable. His uniform was immaculate, its creases sharp enough to cut glass. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar, a marvel of Swiss engineering, ticked away the seconds with a silent, merciless precision that mirrored his own command style. But tonight, that precision was a mockery. His gaze, usually a sweeping, all-encompassing survey of his domain, was locked onto the central holographic table. There, a three-dimensional map of a hostile mountain range pulsed with a sickening, urgent crimson. It was Sector Gamma 9, a godforsaken maze of rock and sand, and within it, a single icon blinked erratically. Pathfinder Team Kodiak. 12 men. The best he had. A forward reconnaissance unit sent to paint a target. Now they were the target. The fragmented communications, ripped to shreds by sophisticated enemy jamming, painted a grim, staccato picture of their demise. They were pinned down in a narrow, winding canyon. A place the locals called the Serpent's Tooth, hemmed in on all sides by a well-entrenched and overwhelmingly superior force. Their last coherent transmission wasn't a report. It was a plea, a raw, desperate cry for air cover that had been brutally severed by the sound of a nearby mortar impact. Intel, give me an update. Now. Finch's voice was low, a controlled baritone that sliced through the hushed tension of the room. He didn't look away from the map, from the blinking red icon that represented 12 lives hanging by a thread. A young intel officer, her face pale in the blue light, swiped a hand through a holographic data stream. Sir, the jamming protocol is adaptive. It's unlike anything we've seen. We're getting milliseconds of data, but no sustained link. Last packet confirmed they're taking direct fire from elevated positions. They're completely boxed in. The words hung in the air, a clinical death sentence. The entire room seemed to be holding its collective breath, the only sound the whisper-quiet hum of the cooling fans. Finch didn't need visuals. He had been in places like the Serpent's Tooth. He could feel the grit in his teeth, smell the cordite, hear the deafening, disorienting crack of incoming fire echoing off the canyon walls. He knew the sheer, primal terror of being a sitting duck, of searching for cover where none existed. The memory was a shard of ice in his gut. Air assets, he commanded, finally turning his head to face his flight operations chief, a stern-faced woman who looked as though she hadn't smiled in a decade. Status on every bird in this sector. The flight chief recited the facts with the dispassionate rhythm of an executioner. Sir, the F-35 squadron is grounded. A cascading software failure in the targeting pods. A bug in the latest patch from Lockheed. They're bricks until we get a fix. The F-22s are on the eastern border, running a priority deterrence patrol. Mission critical, cannot be recalled. The drone wing is out of range, and the weather system moving in over the peaks is a full-blown electrical storm. Low-altitude flight would be suicidal for any conventional craft. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The book says we wait for the storm to pass, sir. ETA, for a viable support window, is 3 hours. 3 hours. An eternity. Finch ran a hand over his face, the rough stubble on his jaw a minor, irritating disruption to his otherwise perfect composure. The book. the hallowed protocols, the unyielding logic of the system he had dedicated his life to. They all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Pathfinder Team Kodiak was a write-off. He was supposed to follow the rules, to cut his losses, to prioritize the integrity of the broader strategic picture. But the thought of 12 men dying while he ticked a box on a form, while he waited for a storm to pass, was a poison he could not swallow. His self-control, the bedrock of his entire identity, finally fractured. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He did something far more terrifying to the assembled staff. He brought his fist down on the edge of the holographic command table, his knuckles connecting with the hardened glass with a sharp, sickening crack. A spiderweb of fractures instantly bloomed across the pristine surface, distorting the map of the serpent's tooth. The Patek Philippe on his wrist now seemed like a cruel joke. "To hell with the book," he snarled, his voice a low, guttural roar of pure, condensed fury. "To hell with the storm, and to hell with the goddamn software patch." He leaned over the cracked table, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "Find me anything. Anything with wings and an engine. I don't care if it's a cargo plane, a trainer jet, or a damn crop duster from a local farm. I need a shadow over that valley. I need distraction. I need to give those men a reason to hold on for 5 more minutes. Find me something that flies." Now, the general's outburst sent a shockwave through the Cerberus command center. It was as if a marble statue had suddenly bled. The staff, accustomed to Finch's icy calm, scrambled with a renewed, frantic energy. Keyboards clattered, data streams scrolled, and voices murmured in urgent, hushed tones. They were chasing a phantom, searching for a solution that every logical metric told them did not exist. It was a desperate, futile exercise in hope. It was in this maelstrom of controlled chaos that a quiet, hesitant voice cut through the noise. "Sir." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Eva Rostova, a young intelligence analyst tucked away at a secondary console. She was a data prodigy, a woman who could see patterns and streams of raw code that others saw as gibberish. Her world was one of algorithms and probabilities, not battlefield realities. She looked up, her wide, intelligent eyes blinking, adjusting from the glow of her screen to the imposing figure of the general. Finch turned, his expression a mask of impatience. "What is it, Lieutenant? If you don't have a viable asset, I don't have the time." "Sir, it's not a viable asset. Not by current standards," Rostova began, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence as she pointed to a line of text on her display. "But according to the auxiliary field logs, there's one aircraft on Airstrip Sierra November that is fueled, armed, and designated mission-ready. An A-10 Thunderbolt, too." The name hung in the sterile air like a foul odor. For a moment, there was only silence, punctuated by the hum of the servers. General Finch stared at the young lieutenant as if she had just suggested they attack the enemy with catapults. "An A-10?" he repeated, the words dripping with a scorn so potent it felt like a physical force. He took a step toward her, his shadow falling over her console. "A Warthog? You're suggesting I send a flying tractor into a sophisticated anti-air environment? A relic from a boneyard that's older than you are, Lieutenant?" His voice rose, the controlled anger now morphing into incredulous, biting sarcasm. He gestured expansively at the holographic displays, showing the enemy's advanced jamming capabilities. "I'm asking for a scalpel, something that can slip through the cracks, a stealth asset that can survive. You're offering me a rusty sledgehammer from a museum, a bulldozer with wings, and a cannon designed for a different century, for a different war." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper that was meant for her alone, but was heard by everyone in the vicinity. "Tell me, Lieutenant Rostova, in all your data-driven wisdom, did your algorithms account for the fact that an A-10's radar cross-section is roughly the size of a barn? Or that its top speed would make it a leisurely target for the kind of surface-to-air missiles they have in that canyon?" He straightened up, his contempt now a public spectacle. "Give me a real jet, with real capabilities, not some fossil that belongs on a pedestal at the Air Force Museum." He dismissed her with a sharp, contemptuous wave of his hand, turning his back on her completely. The brief, audacious flicker of hope was extinguished, replaced by the grim, suffocating reality of their situation. The room fell silent again, the other officers avoiding Rostova's gaze, her face now flushed with a mixture of humiliation and frustration. She lowered her eyes back to her screen, her proposal rejected, her logic shattered by the sheer force of the general's disdain. Finch returned his attention to the cracked holographic map, his mind now resigned to the inevitable. The storm would pass. The F-35s would eventually be patched, and he would spend the rest of his career writing after-action reports and attending the funerals of 12 men he had been forced to abandon. It was a cold, bitter pill, the kind of compromise that slowly eroded a commander's soul. He was a man of the system, and the system had just demanded its pound of flesh. He was about to give the final, grim order to stand down, to officially designate Kodiak Team as lost, when another voice, calm and steady, broke the silence. "General, I have a new contact." The voice belonged to Chief Analyst Reyes, a grizzled veteran whose station was a nest of customized monitors at the back of the room. Reyes was a man who had spent 30 years staring at screens, interpreting the silent language of electronic signals. He was unflappable, a rock of calm in any storm. But now, his voice carried an unmistakable note of confusion. The room, which had been sinking into a state of resigned despair, snapped to attention. Finch froze, his hand hovering over the console. "ID, Reyes. Now." The command was instant, automatic. An unknown contact was a threat, and a threat was something he understood. "That's the thing, sir." "Negative ID," Reyes replied, his fingers flying across his keyboard, pulling up diagnostic data. "No transponder signal. No IFF handshake. It's a ghost blip, but it's not a sensor malfunction. I'm getting a clear, solid signature." He paused, leaning closer to his main screen. "Low altitude. Very low. It's hugging the terrain, using the ridge lines for cover. And it's moving fast. Its heading is locked dead on for the Serpent's Tooth." A collective intake of breath seemed to pass through the command center. Every eye swiveled from the main holographic map to Reyes' station. On his primary display, a three-dimensional rendering of the mountain range showed a single, flickering silver needle slicing through the digital landscape. It wasn't a blip. It was a vector, moving with an unnerving, predatory purpose that defied all logic and protocol. It wasn't just an aircraft. It was an anomaly. Finch strode toward the back of the room, his eyes fixed on the silver needle. His blood ran cold. He knew that flight profile. He knew that suicidal, terrain-hugging approach. He knew the way it used the natural curvature of the Earth and the shadows of the mountains to stay below the radar horizon until the last possible second. That wasn't the flight path of a rookie pilot, and it certainly wasn't the flight path of a sanctioned asset following a pre-planned route. It was the flight of a hunter, an apex predator moving in for the kill. A shiver of dread, cold and sharp, traced its way up his spine. This was more than just a rogue pilot. This was a specter from his past, a nightmare he had long since buried under mountains of paperwork and years of willful forgetting. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see Lieutenant Rostova. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, something that looked like awe. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the screen, at the silver ghost. Her voice was a whisper, a soft, reverent breath that seemed to be a testament to a legend he had tried to erase. "There's only one pilot who would fly like that," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And she's not supposed to exist." She finally looked at Finch, her eyes holding his. Her call sign was Nix. Nix. The name was a key, unlocking a sealed door in the fortress of his memory. The sterile, blue-lit command center dissolved around him, replaced by the vivid, chaotic images of another mission, another lifetime ago. Operation Cinder Fall. The same impossible jamming. The same desperate, dying calls from a trapped squadron. The same failure of the system. The F-22s had been too far. The F-35s hadn't even existed yet. The order had come down from on high. Stand down. Abort. The assets are considered lost. But one pilot had refused. A young woman with eyes of steel and a reputation for being an untamable, unyielding maverick. Captain Anya Petrova. Call sign Nix. He remembered watching the radar screen then, just as he was now, a frantic, horrifying dance of light as her A-10, an anachronism even back then, had flown straight into the fire. She had ignored every direct order, every threat of court-martial. She had flown in blind, relying on nothing but her own visual cues and a deep, intrinsic understanding of the battlefield. The system had condemned her for it, grounded her, stripped her of her rank and her career. But she had saved 19 men that day. 19 lives that command had written off as an acceptable loss. 19 men who were still breathing because she had decided that her duty to her fellow soldiers superseded her duty to a set of rules on a page. The flashback, vivid and brutal, receded, leaving General Finch standing in the present, the blue light of the Cerberus command center feeling colder than ever. He was staring at the flickering silver needle on Reyes's screen, but he was seeing a ghost. It was her, Nix. The same impossible flight profile, the same reckless, determined course that spat in the face of self-preservation. The same silent, profound defiance of all logic, all protocol, all common sense. She had heard the call, the unheard, unanswered cry of Pathfinder Team Kodiak, and she was answering it now, just as she had all those years ago. A ghost pilot in a ghost jet flying to save a ghost squad. A complex, warring triad of emotions washed over him. A profound sense of awe at her sheer, unmitigated audacity, a cold dread for the chaos she was about to unleash, and a reluctant, grudging respect that felt like treason to the very system he embodied. He knew what she was about to do, and he knew with a certainty that was both chilling and inspiring that nothing in this room, no order he could give, no threat he could make, would be able to stop her. The game had just changed, and the one person who wasn't even supposed to be on the board had just taken control of it. The internal struggle was a silent, violent war. One part of his mind, the commander, the general, the man of rules, screamed at the violation. She's a liability, a rogue element, a direct and flagrant breach of the chain of command. To allow this to proceed is to sanction anarchy. It undermines everything. But another voice, quieter, more primal, the voice of the soldier he had once been, whispered a different, more dangerous truth. She's also our only option, the only hope for 12 men who are about to become a grim statistic. The system has failed them. The only one who can fix it is the one the system cast out. The contradiction was a poison. He reached for the communications microphone on Reyes's console, his hand, for the first time in his memory, shaking almost imperceptibly. He squared his shoulders, pushing the internal conflict aside, donning the mantle of command one last time. His voice, when it came, was a cold, hard stone, an attempt to reassert order over a situation that was rapidly spiraling into beautiful, terrifying chaos. Unidentified aircraft, this is Vanguard Command. You are in restricted airspace. State your identification and return to base. That is a direct order. There was a finality in his tone, a last-ditch attempt to rein in the wild card, to pull the rogue element back into the fold. He was testing her. He was seeing if the fire of her past defiance had been tempered by years of forced retirement, by the quiet obscurity to which he had personally condemned her. Nothing. Only the faint, mocking hiss of static. Reyes glanced up, a new line of worry etched on his face. Sir, she's flying dark. No comms, no data link. She's either not receiving, or she's choosing not to respond. But her flight path is unchanged. Dead on for Kodiak's last known position. The words confirmed Finch's worst fear. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act of will. Nix knew the rules better than anyone. She had simply decided they no longer applied to her. He gripped the mic tighter, his knuckles white. Nix, he tried again, his voice now a low, menacing growl. He was breaking protocol himself by using the unsanctioned call sign. I know it's you. This is General Finch. You are not cleared for this engagement. I repeat, you're not cleared. Return to base immediately. Do not force me to classify you as a hostile. The threat was an empty one, and they both knew it. He wouldn't, shoot down an American pilot who was flying to save a squad of American soldiers. He was caught in a perfect paradox, a trap of his own making, and she was the one who had set it. Then a miracle, or a curse. A voice broke through the static. It was clear, calm, and utterly terrifyingly focused. A stark, professional contrast to the chaos of the moment. "I hear you, General." It was her, Anya Petrova. Her voice was exactly as he remembered it from the court-martial hearing. Steady, devoid of fear, and carrying an authority that had nothing to do with rank. "Kodiak needs help. I am in position to provide it." She wasn't arguing with him. She wasn't defying him. She was simply stating the mission parameters as she saw them. A mission that transcended any order he could give. A beat of agonizing silence filled the command center. General Finch's mind raced, a frantic cascade of possibilities and consequences. He could stand on ceremony, insist on procedure. He could order her again to return to base, knowing full well she would refuse, and that 12 men would be slaughtered while they debated the finer points of the military rulebook. Or he could do the unthinkable. He could grant permission to the one person who hadn't asked for it, sanctioning the unsanctionable, and in doing so, acknowledge the one truth that mattered more than any protocol. Those men were going to die without her. It was in that agonizing moment of indecision that the comms console crackled to life with a fresh, raw transmission from the ground. It wasn't a voice. It was a data burst, a single, fleeting second of video from the helmet camera of Kodiak Sergeant. The image was a chaotic, violent blur of shaking earth, the blinding flash of a nearby explosion, and the wide, terrified eyes of a young soldier diving for cover. Then, static. That single, visceral image did what no argument could. It cut through the sterile air of the command center and made a mockery of their debates. It was the face of death, and it was a face Finch could no longer ignore. His eyes darted from the helmet cam feed to Reyes's screen, where the silver needle of the A-10 was now practically on top of Kodiak's position. He saw the swarm of enemy markers that surrounded the blinking red icon on the main holographic map. The choice was no longer his. It had been made for him by the terror in a young soldier's eyes. The rules had been rendered irrelevant by the unblinking reality of the battlefield. He slammed his hand down on the transmit button, his eyes closing for a brief, agonizing moment. The decision was an act of surrender, a betrayal of every principle he had ever held. His voice, when it came, was not a command. It was a release. "Nix, you are clear to engage." He paused, the words feeling alien on his tongue. He added, more to himself than to her, a quiet, desperate plea to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. "Engage, and may God forgive me." He didn't wait for a response. He didn't need one. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that she had already begun her attack run. She had stopped waiting for orders the day he had ordered her to stand down and let her comrades die. The ops room held its collective breath. The next few seconds stretched into an eternity. On Reyes's screen, the silver needle of Falcon 7 vanished as she dropped even lower, disappearing completely into the terrain clutter of the canyon. She was a ghost, an aircraft moving with a deadly purpose that was now officially sanctioned. The voiceover narrator described the scene on the ground. The desperate men of Pathfinder Team Kodiak were huddled behind a meager rock formation, their ammunition dwindling, their hope all but extinguished. They were facing their last moments, their eyes scanning a sky choked with a swirling, blinding dust storm, searching for a savior that wasn't coming. And then they heard it. It wasn't the distant, high-pitched scream of a modern fighter jet. It was a deep, guttural, air-ripping growl that seemed to come from the very ground beneath their feet, a sound that shook their bones and rattled their teeth. Out of the brown, churning haze, a silhouette emerged, a flying tank of a machine, slicing through the air so low it seemed to be a part of the landscape itself. The unmistakable, brutal shape of an A-10 Warthog. On the ground, a sergeant, his face caked with dirt and blood, screamed into his comms, his voice a ragged mix of shock and unbridled, hysterical joy. "That's a Warthog! By God, that's a Warthog! We've got air! We got air. Back in the Cerberus command center, every eye was glued to the screens, watching a battle unfold through the fragmented, indirect language of data. Chief Analyst Reyes was staring at his console, his professional composure completely shattered. "She's flying visual," he breathed, his voice filled with disbelief. "In that dust storm, with that level of electronic interference, she's flying purely on visual. There's no way she can get a target lock. It's impossible." His words were a professional's warning, a statement of fact based on decades of experience and a deep understanding of technological limitations. But the next sound that crackled through the speakers silenced all doubt, all logic, all debate. It was not the sound of a distant explosion. It was the deafening, soul-shaking, air-tearing roar of a Gu-8 Avenger cannon. The sound was a force of nature. It wasn't the sharp crack of a missile. It was the sound of 1,000 chainsaws ripping through the fabric of the sky, a deep, resonant, terrifying rumble that was as awe-inspiring as it was apocalyptic. It was the sound of righteous, overwhelming fury being unleashed upon the earth. On the main holographic map, a new series of blips, a cluster of enemy mortar positions that had been tormenting Kodiak team from a hidden ridge, erupted into brilliant, fiery blossoms of destruction. The infantry on the ground, witnessing the pinpoint accuracy of the strike, began to cheer, a raw, primal roar of relief and savage joy that filtered back through the shaky calms. Finch watched, a strange, cold feeling washing over him. It was a mixture of dread and profound, unwilling respect. Reyes was right. In that storm, with the enemies jamming, frying every sensor in the sector, no modern aircraft could have gotten a targeting lock. The F-35s, with their billion-dollar avionics, would have been blind. Her skill wasn't technological. It was analog. It was a pure, unadulterated mastery of her craft, an intuitive, almost mystical connection between pilot, machine, and battlefield. It was in this moment, as he watched the blips of the enemy positions disappear one by one under a hail of precise, deadly cannon fire, that the memory of Operation Cinder Fall came rushing back, sharp and vivid. But this time, he saw it differently. He remembered her flying not to fight, but to shield. She had become the target, a human magnet for enemy fire, deliberately drawing attention away from the trap recon unit, while ground forces moved in to extract them. She had flown into a kill zone, not to destroy, but to protect. She had danced with death for hours, a brutal, relentless ballet of survival. The memory was not of a warrior, but of a guardian. He remembered the feeling of shame, of awe, of rage as he watched her defy his orders, his protocol, and his sense of what was possible. He remembered her battered A-10, a flying wreck held together by sheer willpower, landing on a rural road, its engines dying, its hydraulics shot. The memory was a revelation, a key to understanding the woman who was currently flying a ghost mission for him. Her flying wasn't just a job, it was a promise. She flew because she knew, intimately, what it felt like to be abandoned. She flew not for glory, not for medals, but for the men on the ground who were out of time. She was not a rogue pilot. She was a moral compass, a living embodiment of a duty that was higher than any order, more sacred than any rule. And as he watched her finish her run, the sound of the Ju-8 fading into the distance, Ellison knew that he wasn't just watching an operation. He was watching a legend being reforged in the fires of the Serpent's Tooth. And he was about to get a front row seat to the truth behind that legend. The roar of the Ju-8 cannon faded, leaving behind a silence in the Cerberus command center that was far more profound and significant than the one that had preceded it. The air, once thick with the acrid scent of anxiety, now felt thin, charged with the ozone of a miracle. The impossible had just happened, and the men and women in the room were struggling to reconcile it with the cold, hard logic of their world. Before anyone could speak, the comms console crackled back to life. It was the sergeant from Kodiak team, his voice shaky with adrenaline, but ringing with a profound, life-altering relief. "Base, this is Kodiak Actual. Enemy fire has ceased. The mortars, they're gone. That pilot, my God, I've never seen anything like it." Are you seeing this on your end? A wave of raw, unfiltered emotion washed over the room. It was the sound of 12 men who had been certain of their death, now alive. Finch leaned into the mic, his voice steady, but still laced with a lingering disbelief. Copy that, Kodiak. We have you loud and clear. Can you confirm the damage assessment? Confirmative, the voice from the ground replied, now with a note of trembling awe. 3 entrenched mortar positions taken out clean. No overspray, no collateral damage. And she did it with no target locks. Our own targeting pods couldn't even acquire them through the dust. The words were a testament to a feat so extraordinary it bordered on the supernatural. Their own advanced technology had been blind, yet a pilot, using only her eyes and her instincts in a choking, electronically hostile dust storm, had performed with horrifying, beautiful precision. It was then that a new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Aristhorne, a civilian munitions analyst with a reputation for being a cold, data-driven realist, looked up from her console, her face pale. She had been running her own diagnostics, pulling the raw telemetry from the A-10's brief data bursts. General, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I've analyzed the cannon expenditure logs from her weapon system. She paused, swallowing hard, as if the numbers themselves were unbelievable. She only fired 57 rounds from the GAU. The number, so small, so insignificant in the grand scheme of the firefight, hit the room with the force of a physical blow. 57. 57, another officer repeated, the word a gasp of disbelief. To take out 3 separate, entrenched positions? Most pilots would burn 5 times that just for suppression. That's not possible. The GU, A-Avenger, was a weapon of overwhelming force, a fire hose of depleted uranium designed to blanket a target area. To use it with such surgical precision was to defy its very nature. It was like using a sledgehammer to perform brain surgery. Finch turned to his staff, his eyes scanning their faces, searching for an answer they didn't have. How? He demanded, the question not a command, but a genuine plea for understanding. How in the hell is that even possible? It was then that an older man, who had been watching silently from the shadows, stepped forward. Warrant Officer Sully Sullivan was a retired Warthog crew chief, a man with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands and 30 years of A-10 maintenance in his bones. He had been brought in as a consultant on the fleet's aging systems. General, Sully said, his voice quiet, calm, and carrying the immense weight of experience. His eyes were fixed on the screen where the ghost blip of Nix was now moving away. That kind of precision, that's not just skill, that's a conversation. Finch leaned in, his professional curiosity now a raging fire. What do you mean a conversation? Sully took a deep breath, his gaze distant, as if seeing ghosts of his own. I mean, sir, that's the mark of a pilot who knows her bird not as a machine, but as a partner. She's flown in places where every single round had a count, where there were no second chances, no air support, no fancy computers to do the aiming for you. She's flown where a miss didn't just mean a failed mission. It meant death, for her, or for the people she was there to save. She's not just firing a cannon. She's speaking a language that's been all but forgotten. She's an artist, general, and she's using a Gatling gun as her paintbrush. The words painted a portrait of a pilot forged in a different kind of fire, a fire more intense and more unforgiving than anything the modern military could simulate. Finch's mind returned to the ghost of his memory, to Anya Petrova. He now understood the why behind her impossible skill. The system had tried to break her, but in doing so, it had only honed her into a weapon of surgical precision, a force of nature that was now operating completely outside of their control. The revelation hung in the air, as tangible as the holographic displays. The command center, a fortress of data and logic, was now filled with the silent, creeping awe of the impossible. The tactical problem was solved, but a far greater mystery had taken its place. Who was this woman? Not the pilot on the file, but the artist, the ghost, the legend who had just painted a masterpiece of salvation in the sky. General Finch's professional curiosity had metastasized into a raw, personal obsession. He needed to understand. He needed to debrief her. He needed to look in the eyes of the woman who had so thoroughly and beautifully shattered his worldview. He grabbed the microphone again, his voice no longer a command, but a desperate plea. "Nix, come in. This is Vanguard Command. We need your debrief. We need to know your status. Acknowledge." The room held its breath, waiting for the calm, steady voice that had saved them all to respond. Nothing. Only dead air. The silent, final confirmation that she was not there for a medal, or a debrief, or a court-martial. She had come to do a job, and the job was done. "Try all frequencies," Finch ordered the comms officer. "Secure, open, even the old emergency channels. Find her." The officer's fingers flew across her console, but it was useless. Nix had gone silent once more, a phantom who had appeared from the ether to save the day and then vanished just as quickly. Finch's frustration, a tightly coiled spring of confusion and awe, finally snapped. He slammed his fist on the console next to him. Not the glass this time, but a solid metal panel. A nearby water glass, forgotten for hours, rattled and fell to the floor, shattering with a sharp crack that echoed the one on the holographic table. He was a man who had lost control of his world, and he was desperate to get it back. "Sir," Reyes said, his voice quiet and somber. "The A-10's gone. She's dropped below the mountain range, completely off our scopes. She's out of range." The words were a final, brutal punctuation mark. She had not only come, performed the impossible, and saved 12 men. She had also vanished without a trace, a wisp of smoke in the wind. Finch stood there, a solitary figure in a room full of people, staring at a blank screen where the silver needle had once been. He had a victory he couldn't explain and a pilot he couldn't find. He had a debt he couldn't repay and a mystery that was now consuming his entire being. He turned to Lieutenant Rostova, the young analyst who had first dared to speak the A-10's name. His face was a mask of cold, hard resolve. He said her call sign was retired after Operation Cinder Fall. He said she wasn't on any active roster. "Yes, sir," Rostova replied, her voice still filled with awe. "Then give me the files," Finch commanded, his voice a low growl, a promise of a hunt that was just beginning. "I want every single document on Operation Cinder Fall. I want the full, unredacted report. I want to know who Anya Petrova is. I want to know why she's not on any list. I want to know everything." The senior officer who had been present for Cinder Fall stepped forward. "Sir, those files are sealed. Aegis-level encryption. You need a special clearance from the Joint Chiefs. A process that could take weeks if it's approved at all." Finch didn't even look at him. His eyes were still fixed on the blank screen. "I don't care if it's buried under the Pentagon in a lead-line box. Someone just saved 12 of my men when the system failed them. She didn't fail them. I want answers, and I want them now. Give me that clearance. This isn't just about a mission anymore. It's about a legend, and I need to know the truth behind the myth." The hunt for Nix had just begun, a search not just for a pilot, but for a truth that had been deliberately and systematically buried for years. The ghost had vanished into the terrain, but her legend was just beginning to be born in the heart of the command center. The command center, once a hub of frantic, real-time action, had transformed into a sterile, quiet library of a different kind. The mission was over. The men of Kodiak team were safe, and the focus had shifted from the battlefield of the present to the battlefield of the past. At General Finch's unyielding demand, a digital key had been requested, a virtual gate had been opened, and after a tense, bureaucratic battle that Finch waged with the sheer force of his rank and will, the file was finally released. On the main holographic display, the document materialized. Operation Cinder Fall. Eyes only. Aegis-level classification. Warnings about classified information and restricted access flashed across the screen, a final, defiant protest from the system that had tried to keep this story buried. As the file opened, the grim details of the doomed operation filled the screen, each line of text a fresh wound. The intel had been bad from the start. A mixed squadron had been sent into a zone based on flawed intelligence that had missed one critical detail. The enemy was equipped with a new generation of advanced, mobile surface-to-air missiles, and a powerful, wide-spectrum jamming array. The moment the squadron entered the area, their communications and GPS systems had been fried, turning a planned surgical strike into a chaotic, blind massacre. Finch's gaze was fixed on the screen as the technician scrolled through the report. He saw his own signature from years ago, a younger, more by-the-book version of himself, on the document that had authorized the stand-down. He had made the right decision, the only logical decision based on the information he had at the time. Command had accepted that the remaining 18 survivors on the ground were lost. The mission was a total loss. All further attempts at rescue were aborted, deemed too high risk. The book, the sacred manual of military procedure, had dictated their grim fate. But the document didn't end there. The technician, her face pale with the weight of what she was uncovering, scrolled deeper, past the official reports and into the sealed addendums, the part of the file that had been redacted, buried, and locked away. What emerged wasn't just an incident report. It was a revelation. Her name was Captain Anya Petrova, call sign Nix, an A-10 pilot with multiple commendations for battlefield navigation and close air support under impossible conditions. She wasn't even supposed to be part of Operation Cinder Fall. She had been assigned to standby duty at an auxiliary field, a backup, a placeholder forgotten by command focused on its frontline assets. But as communications began to fail and the desperate, static-laced cries for help filled the airwaves before falling into silence, something in her shifted. The official order came down, full stand-down. The operation was compromised. 18 ground personnel were considered unrecoverable. Command had made its decision. Anya Petrova made hers. She launched. No clearance, no wingman, no support. Just her Warthog, and the screaming silence of a battlefield swallowed by an electronic blackout. She had no radio, no satellite link, no GPS guidance. Just her eyes, her instincts, and her refusal to accept that dying alone in enemy territory was the fate her comrades had earned. Over the course of 8 unbroken hours, she made 17 separate runs through the kill zone. She didn't search for the survivors. She drew fire away from them. She deliberately made herself the most visible, most tempting target in the sky. She skimmed the treetops. She blasted decoys. She triggered enemy radar, lighting herself up like a flare so that the scattered medevac and recovery teams could move, inch by painful inch, toward the wounded. On one run, the file noted with chilling brevity, she had used her own armored wing as a shield, absorbing the shrapnel from a near-miss missile explosion to protect a medical helicopter lifting off with wounded. And on her final run, her jet took a direct hit. Hydraulics failed. Engines sputtered. The navigation array went dark. She didn't eject. She stayed with the bird, bringing it down hard, skidding to a fiery halt on a rural access road just outside the hot zone. She had climbed out of the wreck, bloody and burned, but standing. And every last one of the 18 she went in for survived. Finch stared in silence, his jaw clenched. So why was she discharged? The question was sharp, a challenge hurled at a system that had done the unthinkable. The technician's voice turned cold as she read the final entry from the court-martial hearing. She broke a direct order, sir. Command had classified those 18 men as unrecoverable. She was told to stand down. She didn't. The hearing offered her 2 options: accept a written reprimand and keep flying, or challenge the ruling and face an automatic dishonorable discharge. Her reply had been buried in the footnotes, but the technician read it aloud, her voice unsteady. I was asked if I disobeyed an order. I did, but the order was wrong. I would rather be a good soldier than an obedient one. If you can't tell the difference, then this uniform means nothing. There it was. Her entire career, her legacy, distilled into one line of pure, unfiltered conviction. And the system had cut her loose. Then, a new piece of information appeared. A series of cryptic, unverified reports compiled by an older technician who had refused to let her story die. The files noted 17 unsanctioned rescues in the last 3 years, all in different parts of the world, all following the same pattern. They were named after constellations: the Orion Rescue, the Lyra Extraction, the Cygnus Intervention. In every case, official teams had been told to stand down. Too risky. 0 deaths. 0 failures. The number 17 echoed in the room. It wasn't a single act of defiance. It was a life's work. Finch walked to the large tactical map, a chilling realization dawning on him. She's tapped into our comms, isn't she? He whispered. She's listening. She's waiting for every call we choose not to answer. The air in the room grew cold. Nix was not just a rogue pilot. She was a living ghost, a moral compass in an immoral world, a human being who had sacrificed everything to be a last resort. She was a shadow in the system, a shadow that appeared every time the system failed. And now, after all these years, she had appeared in his own command center to save his own men. The search for the truth had revealed a myth. And General Finch, a man of rules and regulations, was now staring into the face of a legend he had helped create. The first hint of dawn was beginning to pierce the darkness when the call came. It wasn't a coded transmission or a high-level alert, but a routine security report from Airstrip Sierra November, a small, rarely used tarmac on the outer edges of the base. Sir, the security officer's voice crackled over the line. We have an unregistered aircraft on the strip. An A-10. No flight plan, no transponder ID. There's no pilot in the cockpit. It had just appeared. Finch's heart skipped a beat. He didn't need a description. The ghost had returned home. Lock down the area, he ordered, his voice precise and calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. Secure a perimeter. Do not, under any circumstances, touch that aircraft. Do not process it as evidence. Stand back and wait for my arrival. His voice was not that of a commander giving a routine order, but of a man handling a sacred relic. The drive to the auxiliary field was a pilgrimage. He left the sterile, blue-lit world of the command center behind, driving into the pre-dawn mist that clung to the airfield. He walked the final few hundred feet alone, a solitary figure approaching a solitary machine. And there it was, the A-10 Warthog. It sat on the tarmac, a relic of a bygone era that had just become the sentinel of a new one. Its armor plating was a mosaic of battle scars, old and new, each one telling a story. Its powerful engines were quiet, a testament to a journey just completed. It was a machine designed for a different kind of war, but in the hands of Nix, it had become something more, a symbol of hope, a physical manifestation of a promise. He approached the aircraft with a quiet reverence, his gloved hand running along the cool, scarred metal of the fuselage. He climbed the integrated ladder and pulled himself into the cockpit, stepping into her world. It was not what he expected. It was not a jumble of wires and outdated technology. It was immaculate. Every gauge was clean, every switch polished, every instrument in perfect working order. The targeting arrays, which he now knew had been rebuilt from scratch, were a testament to a level of engineering that was both professional and deeply personal. The air smelled of polished metal and ozone, not of oil and hydraulic fluid. And there, on the dashboard, where a pilot's flight log would normally be, was a single piece of paper. It was a corner torn from an old star chart, folded neatly. Finch picked it up, his hands trembling slightly. The handwriting was clean, simple, and direct, just like her voice. The message was a dagger to the heart, a testament to a motivation so pure it was almost painful to behold. They are home. That is all the proof I need. It was a message not for him, not for the military, but for herself. The final, critical piece of the moral puzzle he had been struggling to solve. She didn't fly for glory, or for vengeance, or even for absolution. She flew for the quiet, personal certainty that her sacrifice had not been in vain. He was interrupted by the arrival of Warrant Officer Sully Sullivan, the veteran crew chief, who had been drawn to the scene by the whispers of the ghost jet. "Sir," Sully began, his voice a low, respectful tone. "You gave the order not to touch it, but I've been studying it from a distance. The condition, it's incredible. This bird's cleaner than most of the active fleet. Someone's been taking care of her. Serious care." Finch handed him the note, his mind still reeling. "Any idea where it's been?" Sully shook his head, his eyes scanning the custom modifications. "No record, sir. But from the tweaks and the wear, I'd say it's been flying solo for years." The reinforced armor plating, the custom avionics package, the ammo rack configured for maximum output with zero waste. This isn't standard military protocol. This is personal. He ran a hand gently over the nose of the aircraft, where the cannon was housed. This isn't just upkeep. He murmured, his voice a low, reverent whisper. This is love. Someone loves this jet. This kind of care, it comes from the heart. The words resonated with Finch, a powerful emotional truth that transcended all the logic and reason he had been taught. He had seen the proof of her skill in the sky. But here, in the immaculate cockpit of a jet that was a relic, he was seeing the proof of her humanity. She was not a machine of war. She was a woman bound to her purpose, not by a military contract, but by an unyielding sense of duty and an emotional connection to the one thing that had never failed her, her jet. General Finch's mind, a fortress of logic and protocol, had finally been breached. The rules no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was the truth, and he was standing in the middle of it. He turned to Sully, a new command forming in his mind, one that would redefine the entire purpose of his tenure at Vanguard. "Warrant officer," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "Have this aircraft moved to Hangar 13. Secure it, but do not process it. Don't log it. Don't list it on any inventory. Treat it like a reserve unit. Someone might need it again." The order, so simple yet so profound, was the official beginning of the unofficial. Hangar 13, a forgotten, dusty corner of the base often used for storage, became a sacred space. In the pilot community, it was soon whispered about in hushed tones, unofficially christened the Ghost Hangar. The culture of the base began to shift. A new, unspoken rule was established. A young, cocky F-35 pilot, fresh from training, once made a snide remark about the old junk in Hangar 13. Sully, who had taken it upon himself to be the hangar's unofficial guardian, quietly pulled the young man aside. "Son," he said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of iron, "that piece of junk has brought back more soldiers from places they weren't supposed to come back from than you have total flight hours. Show some damn respect." The young pilot never made the mistake again. The legend of Nix became an institutional truth. Pilots, young and old, would make quiet pilgrimages to Hangar 13, studying the impossible modifications, the subtle signs of a life lived for a purpose higher than any rank or medal. A strange, beautiful mystery began to unfold. The ground crews, mystified, would report that the A-10 was always spotless, always armed, always fueled, and always combat ready. Yet no one ever logged a single maintenance order. "It's like she gets serviced when no one's watching," a crew chief once reported to Finch, his voice filled with a mixture of confusion and superstitious awe. The security officer assigned to watch over the hangar would report strange, fleeting shadows on the surveillance feeds, figures that slipped past every patrol in the dead of night, only to vanish into the pre-dawn mist. When Finch was informed of this, he would simply smile a faint, knowing smile. "Maybe they're not meant to be caught," he would say, his voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Some things work better when we don't get in the way." He issued a quiet, unofficial directive. The rules around after-hours access to Hangar 13 would be flexible. No one needed to say it out loud. The base was now unofficially a part of the conspiracy, a silent partner to a legend. When his deputy asked him what they should call this new, clandestine setup, Finch's response was a culmination of his entire journey, a final, profound statement of his new worldview. "We call it insurance," he said, his eyes locking onto the distant silhouette of Hangar 13. "For when the system doesn't show up." The A-10 Warthog in Hangar 13 had ceased to be merely a machine. It was now a relic, a sentinel, a monument carved not from stone, but from flight hours, defiance, and precision. It was a last resort contingency for a system that had once, and would surely again, fail its people. The story of the ghost Warthog spread faster than any official memo could have. It wasn't shouted in the mess hall or barked across the tarmac, but carried in low tones, passed like a sacred trust between those who flew and those who watched the skies. In a world ruled by standard operating procedures and chains of command, The A-10 and Hangar 13 became an emblem of what it meant to act when bureaucracy froze, a silent vow that no one would be left behind. Colonel Marcus Ellison, the man who had once dismissed the A-10 as obsolete, now saw it as a symbol of a higher truth. He had watched 12 men return alive because of that supposed antique. In the days that followed, he made a decision not to log the event, not to reprimand the breach, but to acknowledge it in the only way that mattered. He commissioned a small, abstract sculpture for the base's memorial garden. It was a single, scarred, metallic wing, pointing defiantly toward the sky. The plaque beneath it bore no name, no rank, no date. Just a single, powerful line, for those who fly when no one else will. There were no briefings about it, no speeches. But word got out. New arrivals were quietly led to it. And when they asked what it meant, the answer always came softly. It's for someone who knew that saving lives matters more than following orders. The myth evolved. Nix was no longer just a rogue pilot. She became an idea, a philosophy, a quiet doctrine whispered between those who had seen the cost of waiting too long for permission. And the base culture subtly shifted. When a mission was deemed too dangerous, when command called for retreat, a quiet process would begin. The comms officer would glance at Finch, waiting for nothing more than a nod. Then, one untraceable frequency, never recorded, never acknowledged, would be left open, just in case. Sometimes it remained quiet. Other times it came alive. A single, encrypted message would flash across the board. Nix in vicinity. No confirmation, no voice. But the room would change instantly. Despair would give way to breathless anticipation. Because that signal meant one thing. Someone was still coming. 2 years later, on the day of General Finch's farewell ceremony, he stood before a room full of pilots, his eyes locking onto the wing sculpture visible through the window. "You'll face moments where the manual doesn't help," he said, his voice low and steady, "where what's right doesn't match what's written. When you do, remember this. The mission isn't to follow the book. It's to get your people home." After the send-off, a new note appeared inside the A-10's cockpit. It was found by Sully, who simply left it there. It read, "Thanks for knowing some things matter more than protocol." It wasn't signed. The legend of Nix became a timeless truth. A story not of a glorious victory, but of a quiet, unyielding promise. A story that proved that some orders are best left unanswered, and some heroes are best left unlisted. Because they fly not for the system, but for the ones still down there, waiting for a savior who sees before the radar does. This tale wasn't just about an unsanctioned rescue. It was a meditation on the very nature of duty. We witnessed General Finch, a man who lived by the rulebook, have his world shattered by a single, impossible act. His journey from rigid commander to quiet guardian of a legend shows that even the most hardened hearts can be changed by selfless courage. And then there is Nix, the pilot erased from the roster only to become a living myth. Her precision wasn't just a skill. It was a promise forged in the fire of past failures. Her A-10 wasn't just an old jet. It was a monument to a love and care that transcended sterile logic. Her legacy is a powerful reminder that the heroes we celebrate aren't always the ones who follow the script. Sometimes, they're the ones who tear it up and write their own. Now, we want to hear from you. What defines a true hero? Is it unquestioning loyalty to the rules, or is it an unshakable moral code? Tell us in the comments which you would choose, protocol or conscience, and why. Please comment with respect for all opinions. These stories deserve to be remembered. If you believe some things matter more than rules, and if you believe in legends that were never meant to disappear, hit that subscribe button. It's your way of ensuring these stories live on. Until next time, stay on your own path.